In the retelling of stories that are part of the Bible, there are narratives so powerful that they have transcended the centuries, shaping the faith of millions of believers. However, among these stories is one that has been forgotten, silenced, or even eliminated from many versions of Scripture. This is the story of Judith, a woman whose courage and determination defied the social conventions of her time and whose actions changed the destiny of her people. The book of Judith, despite being a testimony of faith, wisdom, and courage, has been excluded from many Bibles throughout history, and even today remains a controversial work within various Christian traditions. In this video, we will reveal the reasons behind this exclusion and the mystery surrounding its disappearance. But before continuing, I invite you to subscribe to the channel so that you do not miss future content that will help you understand the revelations and lessons that we can draw from these ancient stories and how they impact our daily lives. Now join me to discover what really happened in ancient times. The context in which the story of Judith takes place is one of total darkness and hopelessness. At that time, the Assyrian Empire was at its height, extending its influence and dominion over known nations with insatiable ambition. Under the leadership of the ruthless King Nebuchadnezzar, the Assyrian Empire was not content with merely expanding its borders. Its goal was clear: the total submission of all nations, the absolute conquest of all that existed. At the head of this vast army marched Holofernes, a general feared throughout the ancient world, known not only for his brutality, but also for his unwavering loyalty to the king and his effectiveness in carrying out the crown's orders. This unstoppable and well-trained army advanced relentlessly, destroying everything in its path. Cities fell one after another, and the hope of the people was like smoke dissipating in the wind. In the midst of this unstoppable advance, Israel found itself on the brink of annihilation. The city's defenses were weak, the leaders were terrified and unable to organize an effective resistance, and the people lived in anguish because their destruction was imminent. Faced with this desperate situation, the Israelites clung to the only thing they had left: their faith in God. The people of Israel cried out fervently, asking God to help them, to free them from this mortal threat. Judith 4:15 tells us that in that moment of despair, the people prostrated themselves before the Creator, asking that His divine intervention be the only possible salvation. This prayer reflects a feeling of anguish and hopelessness, a people who see their strength fading and wonder if God is still with them. What really distinguishes this story from so many others, however, is not only the context of oppression and struggle. It is the figure who emerges from the midst of despair to bring hope and salvation to her people. In a moment of absolute crisis, when all seemed lost, Judith emerges as an unexpected heroine, defying all expectations of her time. Judith is a woman of unwavering faith, but she is also a woman of great courage, wisdom, and determination. Her story is a testament to the fact that even in the darkest of times, one person can make a difference. Judith is a widow from the small town of Bethulia, and although her life began in a simple way, her destiny was destined to be something much greater. At first glance, Judith might seem like an ordinary woman. She is a widow who carries with her the pain of having lost her husband, and her life is marked by mourning. In a social context where women had no decision-making power, where leadership was almost exclusively reserved for men, Judith seemed to be an insignificant figure. But Judith is no ordinary woman. Instead of being a passive figure, subject to circumstances, she becomes the leader that her people needed. In an era where women were seen as incapable of leading or making important decisions, Judith completely defies these social norms. Her faith is firm, her wisdom is profound, and her courage is unmatched. When Israel's leaders are lost in despair, when even those who were supposed to lead them begin to doubt divine intervention, Judith stands up and utters words that resonate as a challenge to despair. "Let me accomplish something that will be remembered by future generations." Judith 8:32. This act of faith is not only an acknowledgement of her trust in God, but also an act of defiance in the face of adversity. Judith does not limit herself to praying for a miracle. She knows that if she wants her people to be saved, she must act with wisdom and courage. Her mission is not impulsive or careless, but is the result of days of fasting, prayer, and careful preparation. She knows that what she is about to do is monumental, and she is willing to risk everything to fulfill God's will and free her people. Judith demonstrates that true courage is not in physical strength, but in the ability to make wise and courageous decisions in times of desperation. She knows that if she is to succeed in her mission, she must do everything with precision and care. And so, rather than rushing into the attack without a plan, Judith spends days preparing herself, seeking in prayer the guidance she needs. In this process, her faith is not just a feeling, but an action. She prepares herself mentally and physically for what is to come, knowing that her success depends not only on her courage, but also on her ability to fully trust in divine direction. The Book of Judith is considered one of the most powerful and edifying works within the biblical tradition. Its story reflects a profound act of faith, courage, and trust in God, essential elements that have inspired believers for centuries. However, despite its enormous spiritual and moral value, Protestant traditions decided to exclude this text from their canon, arguing that it was not part of the Hebrew canon and questioning its historicity. Adding to this controversy is the book's narrative approach, which uniquely mixes spirituality with direct action. Throughout its pages, there are moments of courage, faith, and strategy, but also shocking scenes, such as Judith taking an enemy's sword, which some considered excessively violent or out of place in a text that traditionally promotes ideals of peace and passivity. This mix of spiritual elements and decisive actions generated discomfort in certain circles that preferred a more peaceful narrative, in line with the values that other biblical texts sought to convey. Furthermore, the perception that the play might be more symbolic than historical influenced its exclusion from many Bibles, as some felt that its events did not represent verifiable historical facts, but rather lessons or allegories about faith. Despite this marginalization, the essence of Judith's story has not lost its force. In fact, its message reflects a fundamental and universal principle found throughout Scripture. God has chosen the foolish things of the world to shame the wise, and the weak things of the world to shame the things that are strong. 1 Corinthians 1:27. This verse perfectly sums up the central theme of Judith's story, which is the idea that God can use the weakest and most despised, those the world deems incapable, to fulfill his divine purpose, even in the face of seemingly invincible forces. Judith's story not only highlights the power of faith and courage, but also how the divine plan can prevail through those who fully trust in God, regardless of circumstances or obstacles. Judith's legacy has transcended the boundaries of history and cultures because her faith and courage are not unique to her time, but become a model for all generations to come. One of the most powerful lessons that Judith's story leaves us with is her unwavering faith in God. In a time of extreme crisis, Judith never doubted that God would provide victory, even though the threat she faced seemed invincible. This strong faith was not based on her own strength or abilities, but on the complete confidence that God does not abandon those who remain firm in their faith. In times of adversity, where others would have succumbed to fear or despair, Judith stood firm, certain that God's will would prevail. Her trust was deeply rooted in the divine promise of protection and care. As expressed in Judith 13:18, Blessed are you forever, for having put your trust in God. It was this act of faith that allowed Judith to make the riskiest decision of her life, to enter the enemy camp, confront the forces of Holofernes, and save her people from destruction. Judith's faith not only strengthened her, but also gave strength to an entire people struggling to survive, proving that trust in God can overcome any obstacle, even the most formidable. Another important lesson that Judith's story offers us is the power of courage when it is born of strong faith. Judith not only faced the fear of entering the enemy camp, but she also defied the expectations of her time. In a time when women had no voice or leadership in society, Judith stood as the central figure in Israel's salvation. Her courage was not limited to an impulsive or heroic act, but was the result of a profound act of obedience and trust in the divine plan. She teaches us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward with confidence, even when fear stalks us. Judith invites us to reflect on our own doubts and fears, and to place our faith more deeply in God's guidance. Through her example, we learn that even when we face situations that seem impossible, if we act with faith and determination, we can overcome any adversity. Her story not only shows us a model of courage, but also challenges us to trust more fully in God's power to guide us and strengthen our faith in times of uncertainty. Judith's story is therefore an eternal lesson of how faith and courage can change destiny, even in the darkest of times. It is a reminder that when we fully surrender ourselves to God and trust in His direction, He can use us as instruments of His purpose, no matter how insignificant or weak we may feel. In a world where uncertainty and adversity surround us, Judith's legacy remains a beacon of hope and strength, challenging us to live with courage, confidence, and unwavering faith that God is always with us. Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery and reflection. If you have been inspired by Judith's story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, where we continue to share content that strengthens your relationship with God and helps you understand the revelations that Scripture has for your life. May God bless you and always guide you on your path of faith.